Today we launch Missing at the Table, a 4-part series exposing why African Americans are absent from medicine's power seats and how that's killing us. With my co-host, oncologist Dr. Terrell Corn, we confront the data. Let's chop it up. Dr. Terrell Corn, how you doing?
I'm good, man. Good to see you again, Tony.
Good
Always a pleasure.
Good to be seen. We definitely appreciate all the work that you're out here doing.
I appreciate you, man.
So we're taking on a endeavor. We're calling it Missing at the Table. Can you define that for us? What's missing at the table?
Well, in relation to medicine, there's a few things missing at the table, but the thing that really catch my attention and the thing that we should be focusing on is representation. I think that we need more representation in medicine because it matters. There are studies, there's data that's showing us evidence that people are living longer with representation, specifically African-American representation. African-Americans are living longer with Black doctors who are sitting at the table caring for them. And so we should be focusing on how can we improve the African-American pool as far as workforce, a physician workforce.
You know, when I think of a table, my mind goes back to King Arthur and the Knights of the Round Table. And, you know, when they got in the room, a lot of them was wondering, why was this table a circle? And that's because when you have a circle, there's equal distances from center all the way around the circle. And he wanted them to feel like, even though he was king, that table made them equal. That table represents power. And so when we came up, you and I came up with this the Missing at the Table series, that just spoke volumes to me, because table equals power. If you're not sitting at that table, the round table, you and I have been in meetings before that the table was a different shape, and you clearly knew who was sitting at the head of it and who wasn't.
Right.
And you didn't feel like all things was equal because that table represented someone sitting at the front of it. But this round table is what we're talking about, where everybody is equal.
Yes.
There's equal distribution amongst all things. There's transparency amongst all things. And so Missing at the Table for me is like a symbol of power. You know, who gets tested, who decides, you know, who funds, who designs. You know, can you elaborate a little bit more on that?
Yeah, of course. I think this conversation, you know, makes me think about, how did this even happen? Like, what happened? And you think about history, you know, typically, you know, when you want to understand, you know, the reason, think about the historical events. And so, you know, if you think about the Flexner Report, Abraham Flexner, who, you know, was sponsored by the Carnegie Foundation back in the 1900s to go around the United States medical schools and Canada as well, and to really do a thorough assessment of these schools and the curriculum as such. And based on his report, he basically, out of the almost 200 medical schools, he basically said that a little less than half of these schools were equipped to be called medical schools. Wow. And that report lended itself to the closure of a significant amount of medical schools, specifically African-American HBCU medical schools.
Wow.
5 out of the 7 schools closed after this report. This was in the early 90s. Now, prior to this report, you know, because we had 7 Black schools that were geared towards teaching physicians, essentially African-American physicians, these physicians went on to start hospitals, build hospitals, start insurance companies. Even right here, North Carolina Mutual Life, here in Durham, North Carolina, that was built and established by an African-American physician. So physicians were thriving before this report, making great impact in the communities and also in the country. But after this report, when you close 5 out of the 7 African-American HBCU schools, then that limits the pool of African-American physicians. It's projected that 30,000 physicians per year were limited because of this study, the results of this study. And so therefore, we have a misrepresentation, or the lack thereof, at the table that you're referring to, in my opinion, because of this what I call medical school reform. And that was the first reform, you know, during that time, but we haven't had a reform since. And so since that report, the percentage of African Americans in the workforce has been staggering, only at about 5%. 2.5% of those are African American men. And that has been the case since 1940, and it's 2026. So that needle haven't moved.
Do you think, when you were saying that, here in Raleigh, North Carolina, you and I talked about this. We talked about one of our universities here in Raleigh that had a medical school. I'm wondering if the closure of that was because of that Carnegie study.
100%. Yeah. It's not even a debate. And during the study, Flexner had racial remarks in a 300-page report saying, Black doctors are only good for sanitation workers, commenting on women, having obvious, quote unquote, obvious limitations. So that report was very discriminatory against not only African Americans, but also women. And so the exclusion was starting to manifest itself, I think, during that report. And after the report was released, then we see the closures, and then therefore we see these staggering numbers that are basically stagnant as far as the representation percentage, for sure.
As a people, we are a spiritual people. And sometimes, my personal opinion, I believe our spirituality cuts off possibilities sometimes. Let's take, for example, in our community, when all else failed and we didn't have resources, we didn't have the financial resources, we leaned into our spirituality because our faith in God, we trusted and believed and hoped that whatever our issues were, it would be divinely taken care of. And I was on podcast yesterday with Dr. Tyler Allen, and I told him, I said, I think God works in a lot of different ways, especially with his creation. We're humankind, we're his creation, and there's blessings that we all carry that's divinely given from him. So I believe sometimes our spirituality won't allow us to seek those things. And where am I going? Where I'm going is kids are a reflection of what they see, what they hear. Right? So most of us grew in with parents and grandparents that just was hard workers. So number one, we developed that hard working mentality. But we didn't really see that far beyond the hard work. We didn't place it somewhere. So where did it go? It went to entertainment. It went to one of our interviews. You said you want to be a football star. It goes to athletics. But nobody sees the Dr. Terrell Coring. He's not in the schools talking to kids about you can be this, because they're so focused on the things that society is telling them to be, and that's their way out, right? So if we're talking about representation and we're talking about this Carnegie study and how it impacted the Black medical schools, that goes down to the Black community too, because we're not promoting you, right? You're not in home and they're saying, yeah, you can be a doctor when you grow up. Most of them are telling you get a job. And if they think you're smart enough, they'll tell you to go to college. But even if they tell you to go to college, it's not a place or a placement on or emphasis on what you should be doing. So I think that study affects us in that area, but also when it drills down to our communities, because we don't have those kind of role models to look up to, or at least we don't see them. And everything is visual with our people. Don't you think?
No, I agree 100%. And one thing I'm proud of our community is for our resiliency. I believe our Creator, the Most High, have created us to be a resilient group. And we've proven that through history. I mean, we survived slavery, over centuries of slavery. We survived that, overcame that, and essentially held the highest office in the United States, which is the presidential office. And so it shows you how durable we can be. But I think we need, to your point, more mentorship, more guidance to essentially use that durability and resiliency for good. Essentially, it takes, through the medical training process, one of the requirements in order to get through the grueling process to become a physician. And in this country specifically, you need to have a high level of resiliency because you're going to hit some setbacks. And so we have what it takes, is what I'm saying. But we need encouragement. You see, it's about 9 million African-American youth in the country, in the United States. You look at the 20 to 30-year-olds, it's about 7 to 9 million. But guess what? Only 5,000 of this group apply to medical school. So we're talking about less than 1% of the 9 million I'm referring to. But when you look at the Caucasian population, it's about 24 million Caucasian young adults. Out of that, maybe, 10%, 2.4 million to be exact, apply to medical school. And so it's a significant increase. And so what I'm saying is, we need to increase our application pool, but we need encouragement. The reason why we don't apply is because we don't see it. So we think we can't do it. And if we have the encouragement, if we just apply, increase the application pool, we have what it takes. We will have, I think, success. but we need the encouragement, and also we need the continual support because it's a financial burden. I always say medicine is a rich man's sport. In fact, the people who do apply, who actually get in, about 2% of those applicants fail. They don't matriculate. And it's not because they're not smart. They just don't have the support. The financial support is costly to go to medical school. And some people have to determine, should I be working or can I work while I'm in school? You know, some people taking care of their families, their mom and dad. A lot of our parents are sick because of these disparities, and we're trying to become doctors. Our parents are sick at the same time. It becomes a burden. And so some of us don't even graduate. We have to drop out, take care of families. And so financial burden is a real thing for our, you know, young aspiring physicians. And so we have to support them. We have to encourage young adults, kids, middle school, elementary school to do STEM, do medicine. You can do this. You could be more than an athlete. You know, yeah, God gave you that talent, but he also gave you resiliency too, intelligence too.
I think, do you think we got to start early? Like, you are a man of intention, right? You are very intentional about your studies and your academia. And so someone like you that can give yourself a fighter's chance, right? You're building those bases. I look at you like my son, you know, he has a 3.875. So whether he go into medicine or not, he's positioning himself that that could be an opportunity. What about when we're speaking and talking to our youth that they don't get it right away and the light bulb don't come on? It seemed like medicine, and some of the reasons why we're missing at the table is they haven't positioned themselves to get in the game. And then when they realize the hole might be too deep, this is one of these careers, right, that you got to at least put yourself in the game. You can't have an epiphany your sophomore year in college and you got a 2.8. Or coming out of high school, you're barely getting in college. It's got to be one of them things that you got to be in position to do this, right?
Absolutely. One of the saddest things I have seen is my stepson, when he graduated high school, went to his graduation, and they had all the valedictorians, people with, you know, 4.3 GPAs, Tony. I mean, like over the 4.0 mark. And these were Black kids. And when the moderator of the graduation read their dreams and aspirations, I heard things like, these kids with 4.4 GPAs, they want to be nurses. They want to be firefighters. They don't want to be doctors. And nobody has told them that they can be a doctor. Even with a 4.4 GPA, their limit was a nurse. And nothing against nurses. I love nurses. But what I'm saying is the aspiration isn't there because nobody gives them that. Even me growing up, I didn't see Black doctors, but I seen a Black pharmacist. And so that Black pharmacist told me, you know, hey, you're smart. You should go to pharmacy school. And that's what I did because I was told to. When you're 15, 16, 17, you don't know what you want to do. You don't have enough knowledge. You don't have enough information. You don't have enough experience. And so it's up to the village, the community, the parents to see your gifts, see your talents, see what God has given you, and kind of guide you in a direction. I wish somebody would have told me, hey, man, why don't you go to medical school? You could be a doctor. And maybe I would have avoided pharmacy school altogether, but I don't regret that experience. I'm glad I went. It helped me become a better doctor today as an MD, but it could have saved me a lot of time and also effort. And so what I'm saying to you, Tony, is I just think we lack the nudge. We lack the nudge. You know, somebody need to nudge these kids in the direction early on, like you're saying, that look like them too. And it's very important. It's very important.
It makes a difference. So let's have real talk. So it makes a difference because most of your life, when you're going to the doctor or involved with anybody in a seat of authority, mostly they don't look like you. So now you're going in with the aspirations that they're going to treat you fair. They're not going to look at you different, but this is what you hope. But your mind is telling you through historical context that it may not be that, it may, or it may, right? And so, especially in medicine, you're putting your faith and trust in someone that doesn't look like you. You don't really know what their background is, and you are hoping that they treat you under that Hippocratic oath in fairness, right? But we know most of that in history that was violated. So here comes Dr. Coring. And when you enter the room, there's not only a physical identification, it's almost a spiritual thing, right? You look up and now you saying, at least I don't have to worry about trusting him, right? This is this subliminal exchange going on when you see a black doctor being a black person. And so now that trust barrier is lowered because you can identify with this person, look like you, and you may not even have the same struggle, but you still identify because you look like that person. And so then to move forward, when I first, it is a liberating experience. It is a feeling of confidence, admiration, excitement, proud, when you see young men like yourself excelling and doing these things. So what do you do with that energy? You should take that energy and now say, hey, you can be this too, right? Lift that person up, put that person in front and say, this is the standard.
Yeah.
You got to change the conversation and the standard. The standard can't be Jay-Z or any of them. The standard can't be LeBron. The standard got to be this, because most of you aren't going to reach that right there. But this right here changes lives. And so those are the feelings you do feel when you see a doctor that looks like you, you know, that has aspirations, that wants to do well by you. So let's take it down memory lane. You know, you brought up the study, but we can also go a little deeper than that, because absence didn't start just yesterday. It was built on betrayal, history, and misleading non-compliance. So let's talk about that. Let's talk about Tuskegee, Henrietta Lacks, all these things that deterred us or gave us a tainted view of medicine.
Yeah, no, these topics, you know, sometimes we shy away from them, you know, especially when the outcomes were like the Tuskegee study outcomes, you know, especially in the medical community. But these topics are very important. Because again, in order to understand the why, sometimes all you got to do is look at the historical events. If you want to know why Black folks don't really trust the medical system, take the question a little bit deeper. What happened? What happened? And we don't have to go far. You know, I mean, it started really during slavery times, you know, when they brought us to these plantations and they were experimenting on us then. In fact, we understood how to fix a lot of GYN issues by these physicians operating on slave women. And so a lot of GYN or gynecological procedures have been perfected, you know, through our slavery women ancestors without anesthesia sometimes. And so this is not new. Lack of informed consent is not new. Slaves didn't have the ability to consent for themselves. They weren't given an option or a choice. So all of this stuff is a carry on from slavery is what I'm saying. All of these things you're talking about. And so the more we shy away from really telling the true history, the more we're going to kind of be in oblivion about it. And the more we're going to be not asking the right questions. But I think we should address these issues head on by teaching these issues in our medical curriculum, because we have to sensitize our future providers on the issues so they can have open and honest communication with their future African-American patients. You see, they did a study in 2008 because the stigma was that Black people don't want to enroll in clinical studies anymore because of the Tuskegee experiment. But during this study, they asked the question to Black folks who were very awoke about the Tuskegee experiment, Black folks who knew exactly what happened. And those folks actually said they would be more than happy to participate in the study because they were educated on it. And I know it's counterintuitive, but because they understand exactly what happens if you don't have informed consent, now they are more keen to it. And so people who understand, knowledge is the key. Truth is the key, you know, and so people who understand, now that you have the understanding, you're more prone to a study if you qualify for it. It's just basically educating yourself. And so what I want to encourage colleagues is don't shy away from offering a Black person a clinical trial or the opportunity to participate in a clinical trial because of your own implicit bias, because you think that they don't trust you or the system. In fact, if you educate them on what happened and be open and honest about what happened and show compassion and then offer them the opportunity to participate in the study with informed consent, well-informed consent, they would be more than happy. Probably, according to studies, they are 2 to 3 times more likely to participate in the study. But we just have to put down our implicit and explicit biases, or put everything out on the table and be open and honest, and then talk about how we're going to move forward. But we have to start the conversation during the medical training. We don't get taught this.
Yeah, you know what? That is key what you said. My cousin recently has been diagnosed with leukemia.
Sorry to hear, man.
Yeah, AML, and so they were starting her protocol, and a clinical trial in Spain was showing some promising results. So they were considering maybe adding the clinical trial to her protocol. And initially, he said no. Right now, that's a woman that came to several of my events, and she even was at the Lunch and Learn, and she said no. And then she called me. And she and I talked about it, and she said, Tony, one of my main things as an African American woman is I don't want to feel like I'm being overlooked or taken advantage of or dismissed. And so I paused for a second because that kind of took me back. I almost took my breath away that a very cultured, educated woman, still to this day, that those feelings came out of her in that state of vulnerability that as a Black woman, she was going to get taken advantage of or whatever. So she said no. But then once the physician came in and he explained it and he did a wonderful job with that, she called me back and reconsidered, because he put her at peace. Even though he didn't look like her, it was his words and the realness and the sincerity in his words. Like you're saying, you don't get taught that. That's an innate ability that you have. And it connected. So then she looked beyond the fact that he didn't look like her, and she started looking at his spirit, right? Which resonated with her. And it shouldn't have to be like that. We shouldn't have to go that deep that we got to feel somebody's spirit to make sure it's good. You know what I mean? But whatever happened, that process happened, and now she's going to do that with her protocol. So to your point, and what you were saying to your colleagues, you have to approach certain demographics of people differently.
Yeah.
Based on
100%.
their experiences.
And I think us as a group, not only do we have the gift of resiliency, but we have the gift of spiritual awareness. And we can feel somebody else's spirit. We just innately, we can read rooms very, very well, talking about African-American people in general. You know, we have the unique ability to be able to pick up on vibes, read rooms very well. And so we understand compassion. The person don't even have to speak. Like you said, when I walk in the room, people can feel my energy, my compassion. You know, it is because it's in me. And also, if somebody walk in the room that just don't have the empathy or compassion, guess what? People feel that. You don't even have to say anything. And so when they get that sense, speaking about Black patients, when Black patients get that sense, that's where the mistrust starts. It's not the words. It's just a feeling. It's just a feeling. You can't quantify that. You can't objectify that. That, in my personal opinion, I think that's what it is.
You know, I don't know if you were a Guy fan growing up, but Guy wrote a song. I want to say it was called, didn't they write a song called It's Written All Over Your Face? You don't have to say a word. Remember that song?
Yeah.
Now, they were using it for a different context, but it backs up what you're saying.
Yeah.
You know, you don't have to say a word. It's written all over your face. You know, Dr. T, why is history is important, but in this society now it's almost dismissed. People want to act like history didn't happen unless it validates their viewpoint. But for our people, I can't quite put my finger on it. I think half are aware of stuff, and I think others are not. And it's like the ones that are aware don't quite understand it, and the ones that are not don't want to hear it.
Yeah, I got one of my favorite Bible verses, Hosea 4:6. My people are destroyed for a lack of knowledge.
Yep.
I mean, lack of knowledge can literally destroy you. And it's not just spiritual knowledge. We're talking about health knowledge, financial knowledge. You know, this lack of knowledge literally is life or death. And so it's on you. At the end of the day, we all individuals, we all have access, especially in 2026. Information is readily available, but we have to learn how to seek knowledge. I think we come from an environment or a culture where we want things to be given to us. We want knowledge to be just placed on our lap. But the thing is, if you're depending on information to be placed on your lap, that's probably not true. That information is probably not true. It's probably manipulative. It's probably propaganda, and it's probably leading you to destruction. So if you want true knowledge, you have to seek that out on your own. That's not free as far as effort. It's free in terms of currency, but the knowledge is going to take effort. And so if you expect people to just feed you knowledge, they're going to feed you a bunch of BS, a bunch of propaganda, a bunch of stuff they want to use to manipulate you. And so you have to be able to find good knowledge. And I think once you have a heart and a posture to really seek truth and true knowledge, I think God will lead you from that perspective, but you can't be lazy about it. And I think that's what happened. I think we're lazy recipients of information.
No.
People, when you ask people to go read and go seek knowledge, they're lazy with it and they don't understand. Their life depends on it.
That's right. Yeah. We're talking to Dr. Terrell Corin about missing at the table. And right now we're talking about some of these barriers and misinformation and history. Let's unpack this a little bit. What are some of these barriers that we face? And how can we, what literally can we do about it? Like I was looking at a stat and it said, let's see, studies show Black patients we're offered trials 50% less than our counterparts. Now, how does that happen? What is that all about? You know, so we're talking about barriers.
Yeah.
The main barrier is you don't get offered it. Right? So it don't matter if we can get there, whatever that, but if you don't get offered it, it ain't even starting.
Man, I remember when I was in elementary school, I thought I was good friends with somebody until I didn't get invited to his party. And boy, was I upset. I think that was the first time my feelings was so hurt. I didn't get invited. And it wasn't him. His mom thought I was a bad kid for whatever reason. And so his mom didn't want me to come to his party. And I was devastated. And it's all about perception. She perceived me that way. And then the consequence of that perception is I didn't get the invitation. And so what I'm saying is explicit bias that we carry around. We automatically think maybe sometimes that, oh, this patient won't be interested in a trial. So we don't even take the time to offer. But you won't even know. You're perceiving that because of maybe historical data. Maybe the Tuskegee experiment is kind of plaguing your mind and making your perceptions the way it is and preventing you from even offering. But let me tell you, again, the study in 2008 shows that people, especially Black folks who are understanding of the Tuskegee studies and all the studies that are similar, they're even more inclined to participate in the study because they're woke. They understand. You know, you could talk to those patients, and the patients who don't understand, educate them. But, you know, we should be offering everybody clinical trials who are eligible. And the second piece to that, you know, to go along with the explicit biases is, you know, physicians think that patients just not qualify or don't qualify for the study based on their comorbidities. You know, a lot of African-American patients have multiple comorbidities, not just the high blood pressure and hypertension, but the kidneys not working well. And a lot of times these studies, they want your kidney function to be at least significant enough to tolerate the drug. And so that becomes a huge barrier.
That's right.
Sometimes you have a lot of our Black patients have HIV, and a lot of these studies don't want patients with HIV into their clinical trials. And so we have to understand the comorbidities do make a difference, but whoever is the principal investigator of the trial should be the one to tell you you're not qualified. It shouldn't be your PCP, or it shouldn't be your general oncologist. It should be somebody who's actually in charge of the trial. It's the same concept with transplantation. Only let a transplanter tell you you're not eligible for a transplant. Only let a principal investigator of that clinical trial tell you you're not eligible for that study. You know, it should come from the horse's mouth, so to speak. And so I think that's the barrier.
Yeah,
those are the barriers.
Kind of sparked my mind when you said the comorbidity. It's like what came through my mind was health and fitness and nutrition and all these things, right? So we're sitting here talking about access and who gets access to the seat of the table. But my mind is taking me back to the very beginning because that's how we got to solve it and start there. We got to eat right, take better care of our health.
Yeah.
Because by the time they get to you, if the rest of them jacked up, they can't even take advantage of what you're offering.
Exactly.
So it took my mind to the very beginning that we don't even stress that because we have the mentality sometimes like, I'm going to do me, you know, I'm going to live my best life while I'm here. But sometimes that ain't the life that you're supposed to be living because the end result ain't going to be your best life. Yeah. That's short term.
That's called a generational curse. You know, we see our parents, you know, not taking the time to eat the right things. And honestly, it's hard to blame our parents. You really have to take a step further and really look at the system that they were placed in through redlining And so again, if you want to ask the question, why, let's look at history. What happened? Look at after the Great Depression, during Jim Crow, during those times when Black people were marginalized in communities.
Yeah.
And then, when you don't have the income to really support a grocery bill that's going to require you to cook the healthy foods that you're referring to, guess what? They have fast food restaurants right next to that grocery store. So as soon as you walk out that grocery store and say, hey, I don't have enough money, don't worry about it. We got McDonald's right there. Just go there. You could get the dollar menu and feed your whole family for $10.
Mm-hmm.
But a salad inside that grocery store is $20 if you want to feed a family of 4.
Oh, yeah.
And so these comorbidities, it really start with food, like you were saying. But we're forced to eat the bad food because we don't have enough money to afford things that are on the perimeter of these grocery stores, like the fresh foods, the fresh meats. We can't afford that, Tony. We got to eat in the middle of the store, ultra high processed foods, or we got to go to Mickey D's and eat that magic meat, whatever it is, and the fried foods. And that's what gets us the high blood pressure and the diabetes and the congestive heart failure. And then by the time we get sick with cancer, you're right. We can't even enter the clinical trial because our kidneys are all jacked up and our heart is jacked up.
Yeah. My grandma, I was in conversation with her. She's 90 years old. She's still eating fatback and all this stuff. Right? And so her thing is, I'm 90 and I've been eating fatback. It ain't killed me yet. I'm going out eating fatback. But I said, Grandma, you got to be intentional, right? What you're eating. So she was talking about how food cost is rising mm-hmm. and everything is explosive cost wise. And I said, if you and anybody listening, if your food bill is so absorbent, let's look at what you're purchasing.
Yeah.
Right. So if your food bill is $400 a month, but it's filled with chickens and all these meats and sugary foods, you could literally cut that by 66% if you ate beans, right? That you could pay 99 cents for, that could make gallons of it, right? Or rice, or then you go down to frozen food, because we want to start of that canned food section. Get the frozen fruits and vegetables if you can, and those are what? Cents on the dollar. So now you can buy carrots and broccoli and have all of that, and you will walk out of there with 2 and 3 carts full of food for $100 and $200 by your choices that you make. But we don't want to make that choice. We want to be like my grandma, I love you. I know you listen, but you can't be eating fatback. You know what I'm saying?
But grandma is 90. How did she get to be 90?
Food was organic.
It was different.
It was
different back then, Now, the organic foods, who can afford that? An organic bag of apples is $12.
It ain't even organic. Look, I was in the logistics industry. I tell people, when you go to Whole Foods and you go to Food Line and Carly C's, it's just the level and the amount of toxicity that you're paying for.
Mm-hmm.
So Carly C's, I don't know much about y'all process, but let's say they got 60% toxicity. Whole Foods might have 30, but it's still the same.
Fair.
All you gotta do is follow the truck. The truck stop at all the same stores.
That's
you know what I mean. So we got off track there, but but let's get back to missing at the table. But this stuff is important because these are reasons why we're missing at the table. Mm-hmm. And so we talked about the clinical trials and what are some of the other barriers, Dr. T? We want to get kids more in STEM, and you and I are pushing efforts in that area. But how do we get them started, and at what levels do we need to be represented at the table?
Yeah, all levels, Tony. Again, to be a physician is almost like it's almost like a athlete. If an athlete is deemed athletic based on his God-given abilities, then what society has done is they identify these kids at an early age and they invest in them. They send these athletes to AAU camps at age 12. And, people like Adidas, for example, they'll sponsor you. They'll give you shoes. They'll allow you to travel all over the country to just develop you. My oldest stepson, Makai's like 6'8". Yeah, 250 pounds. And so my wife and I, when we realized God gave him that physical gift, guess what? Coaches was calling us, and they, at the age of 11, it's like, oh, he need to be in a camp. We need to be doing this. We need to be doing that. But guess what? Intelligence is a gift too. Resiliency is a gift too. We have to identify these kids who have the gift. to actually get through a medical program. Identify them at an early age.
Yeah.
Then we have to do what the coach did with us. Hey, they need to be doing this. He need to be doing that. We got to get them involved in this. We got to invest in these kids, man. We got to give them what they need. We got to groom them, really. Because they kids, they don't know. Makai didn't even like basketball. We had to tell him, hey, man, you're going to be tall. You need to pick up a basketball and play it. You know, he didn't know.
Yeah.
And so these kids don't know, Tony. They need to be guided. They need a village. You know, they need somebody to grab them by the hand once we identify their skills, their talents, and groom them, guide them,
So
support them.
how do we do that, brother? So we're going to identify them. So yeah, it falls back to the mentorship.
Yeah.
What does that look like? Because somebody got to invest in being the mentors.
Yeah. So we need to organize. We need to organize not just Black folks, not just Black physicians. All it takes is compassion and care, man. You don't have to be Black to encourage a kid. Anybody can encourage a kid. Kids are so resilient. They barely even see color, but they see compassion. They feel encouragement. And so we just need a collection of folks who are like-minded, who want to invest in these kids' success. And so once we identify the cohort who are willing to invest, everything else is easy because we know what it takes. We know what they need. And all we have to do is just put a little bit of effort into what they need. Some of them just need all I needed was a word of encouragement. That's all you had to give me, and God helped me over the rest of the way. Some people don't need much. Some people need a little bit more. But once you have the underlying foundational ingredient, which is the want to, you gotta want it, and also you need a baseline level of intelligence and resiliency. You have to be able to, overcome, because you're gonna get hit in the mouth a few times during this process, just like any other athlete. You're going to lose a few races. You're going to get punched in the mouth. You're going to tear an ACL. You're going to have some setbacks. But you got to be able to get back on that horse. And that's what separates the good from the great. That's what separates the good athlete from the great. And the same thing in the academic realm. It's the same thing, just different component, different gift. But all it takes is a small cohort of like-minded physicians who are willing to invest in this group of people and just give them what they need. They just need encouragement mainly.
I love that. I love it. Some of these statistics are staggering. I think 5.7% of Black doctors overall, terrible. Less than 3% of those are oncologists. So you breathe in rare air. 4%, 2% pharmacy. I mean, these numbers are extraordinarily low.
Yeah.
And so when we're talking about missing at a table, we're just not lip service. We have the data to show we're missing at the table. We're literally not at the table. We're like a broken leg on the table. And so when we look at these things from an academic leadership standpoint, from a hospital leadership, from an HBCU leadership, it seemed like there's a lot of empty chairs and a lot of empty promises.
Yeah.
So what you just said a couple minutes ago, how you surmised and wrapped it up about how you got to invest in kids and you need a cohort of doctors that see that need. That's how it's going to have to change. We're talking initially about how we're missing at the table. The ones that are at the table got to help feed the others that aren't.
You got to. And I think we need to start with the applicant cohort pool. Again, we got about 9 million African-American young adults that technically, by age-wise, are qualified to apply to medical school. But only 5,000 of those 9 million do that. So that's less than 1%, mainly 0.05%. Whereas other groups, Caucasian groups, 0.1% of their population are applying to medical school. I know earlier I said 10, but let me correct that. It's about 0.1%. And so if we could get our applicant pool to at least 0.1%, meaning just double it, instead of the 5,000 applicants in the pool, maybe increase that to 10,000. Then that gives us a higher chance of acceptance. It's a numbers game.
Do you think it's a time frame with medical school that the kids will shine away from? Like I had this conversation with my son, and he wanted to be a neurosurgeon. He wanted to be in medicine. And he's also in engineering. And some of the conversations we have is like, he'll say, well, I don't know if I want to do school 12 to 16 years.
Yeah.
I said, but look at it like this, Caleb. If you get a master's and a PhD, that's the same time frame. I said, you would be done with medical school and be on your way. And then he thought about it. He was like, yeah, Dad, you're right. I think, like you said, it's always how you reframe and reposition something, because the thought that they have is the years. Every kid that I know academically that's strong enough to apply for medical school, the first thing they say, that take too long. but they don't realize in their lifespan, they're going to change multiple jobs. They're going to give jobs years of their life that they don't like, and then they're going to switch. You know, they're going to do all these things. You was one, right? And you're going to look up in 20 years, you're going to not be happy with your job. Well, you would have finished medical school and residency and everything else within 20 years.
Yeah.
So I had to reposition his thought process. Do you think that's it?
I think you're spot on, Tony. But you got to ask, what motivates our youth? What motivated me when I was young? Money. You know, I grew up poor. So I wanted to get to the bag ASAP. And now it's even crazier. I was talking to a guy. He said his son is just in college, just graduating college, Texas Tech. His son is an athlete. $1 million NIL deal. $1 million. He showed me he was getting basically 90 grand a month. He showed me the account. They were just 19 years old, 90 grand in your account. I couldn't imagine it. If you would told me, you say, hey, Terrell, you know, say if you're good enough as an athlete, you could get $1 million at 18. I'm putting down the books. I'm running sprints. I'm trying to figure out how I can get there.
That's right. You're right. Real talk.
You know, people, we want to get to the bag ASAP, man. We don't want to delay the gratification. And so we have to rewire our kids' minds. We have to break these generational curses. We can't be so motivated by money. Money is not what should be motivating us. It's impact. How can we impact society the most? How can we be lights? How can we be salts? And medicine is a great profession where you could be a light and also salt, how God intended us to be. You can bring people to Christ by being a physician, by healing. And so that's what we should be focusing on. I think we should have to renew our minds and renew the minds of our youth, not to be so driven by money, but be driven by impact. Let's impact life. Let's impact society. Let's make people well, healthier, you know? And if not, let's just encourage them. Encouraging words as a physician is one of the greatest things I love about my job. I may not be able to offer medicine, but I can offer hope. If not hope in medicine, hope in a higher calling. And so I have these conversations with my patients. And I think at least what I'm going to show my son and teach my son is money isn't everything, but impact is. And so if you could be impactful on the society, then that is a great life to live. And so sometimes greatness takes time. And sometimes if you rush to get, you know, the end outcome being money, then you'll be greatly disappointed, you know, in midlife. That's how you get a midlife crisis. And so I think we should be chasing impact. And that's a rewiring of the mind. We have to really, really unlearn all the stuff we learned. I learned that money was very important, and that's what we should be focused on. I even told my granddaddy, hey, I'm going back to medical school. He said, school don't pay your bills. And so,
that's right.
And he was right. I mean, there's a lot of facts to that. But, you know, I wish he would encourage me, hey, son, you're doing the right thing to impact lives.
Look, my dad, I remember, man, I had my my construction management company. I was single.
Yeah.
Like, I ain't get married till I was 31 or something. And I was going to, when I had first decided to get married, you know, I thought I was doing it. So I dropped about 10K on a ring.
Okay.
Into the house, I was all proud.
Yeah.
So my dad, I'm gonna get married. And he says, boy, you should have bought a dually truck. You know what I'm saying? So it's funny that your granddad said it. That's just what our people say. They always be like, why you doing all that? Get us something else and buy you a truck with that.
Right.
You know what I mean?
Right. And so we need to be told, it takes a village, but we need to be told, you know, the right dogma, the right things that we should be doing and what we should be focused on. But during those times, opportunities weren't there. Yeah. My granddad couldn't dream about me becoming a black doctor in this country when he was born in the 1900s, early 1900s, when black people couldn't even go to certain hospitals. That's crazy. Yeah. And so I can't blame him for saying that. Of course, he wanted me to take care of my family financially, but times have changed. And, you know, thank the Lord that we have more opportunity now, but now we have to encourage the youth to focus on what I think is important, which is impact.
So, you know, once we get at the table, we got to position ourselves that we can stay at the table. In your career, do you still feel like, for the youth listening, and we want to encourage them to get into STEM and medicine, do you feel like you got to fight to keep yourself at the table?
That's a great question, Tony. It's scary. And I'm being very honest and transparent. You know, when you don't have a lot of people like mentors that look like you, when you get at the table, you start fearing your ability to preserve your spot. And that becomes a real thing. And so that's when, in my opinion, your spirituality has to really take hold, because it's not like you could call people that has mentored you throughout this entire process to show you how to sustain the level of what quote unquote society may call success. And so what can help with that is also reaching back. And when you reach back, it keeps you humbled. It keeps a constant reminder on where you were. And once you constantly remind yourself where you were, then it also allows you to appreciate your spot, because Lord, it took a lot of sweat, blood, and tear to get here. And so as I continue to encourage younger self, people like your son, to come along, then it reminds me constantly, dang, this is where I was. And that will give you the discipline that you need to maintain your spot, but also give you the encouragement and enthusiasm to maybe encourage others, so you can have more representation. So you won't be looking around these meetings and you're the only, Black person in the room. And so that's the hope. That's the hope. But yeah, you really, it's a real paradoxical, fearful effect. If you're not careful, it can consume you. And you see people, Black people, who get to these leadership positions or they find great success and then they fumble. They fumble. And so, we have to remain humble and disciplined in order to prevent that.
Yeah, I can't speak from the medical standpoint, but from a corporate standpoint and owning my business, it's the same fight.
Okay.
We still have to fight to be at the table, to make that impact. And, you guys, I've done a lot in my life, in my career. A lot of things I feel like I did very well and all these things, trying to give back and stuff. But you guys inspire me. I was like, I want to go back. I want to go to medical school. You know what I mean? Because I said, I just feel that I know I'm too old now, but but the inspiration is like, that's what we need. You guys inspire me. And I don't know if I would be on that journey if it wasn't for cancer. I'm always trying to make a difference in my civic duties and things that I was doing. But cancer, with God, with being like it is, and trusting God that He will heal me, just gave me a different juice. And then to see you guys is so inspiring. And so I try to make change and on the level that I can. But even at my age, I want to go back to medical school. And if there was a way I could do it online, I would, you know what I mean? Or a mixture of it, And so what you're saying is you have to inspire people, but inspiration comes from so many places. Because you inspire me, I'm going to inspire Caleb.
Okay.
You see? Okay. And that's where it starts. Our parents and grandparents could have achieved these levels, but they could have inspired us that we could and made us feel like
And I'm still inspired. Caleb inspires me. He inspires me to represent him well. So when he get here, they won't say, oh, we tried this. This is not going to work. I want them to say, oh, well, we tried it with Terrell. That worked. Caleb is going to be a great success, And so therefore you want to be a bridge builder. At least that's my goal. Is to build that bridge for him, and don't burn that bridge by, me misrepresenting my culture, in a bad way. And so that's now essentially, my calling to keep that bridge not only sturdy, but keep it from, self-inflaming or self-engulfing. And so that becomes the challenge, because you want to keep that bridge very patent for others to basically be able to walk across to get to essentially where God has blessed me to be. And so that's inspiration for me, for him.
So we're talking about solutions. We're talking about expanding accountability. So while we got a little more time, let's start defining, our next steps. This is a 4-part series, and then eventually you and I want to do the conference. So what's our why? Right?
It's simple, man. Like I said, this study that they did in 2023, they essentially looked at about 1,100, 1,500 counties in the United States. And they focused on counties that were pretty much had a good representation of Black people and also a good representation of Black doctors. And they studied these counties for about 10 years. And they noticed in 5-year increments, as the Black doctor pool increased by 10%, Black people live longer. And as the Black pool continued to increase, Black people live longer. And so the data is there. The studies have been done. Black doctors matter. because Black patients matter, and because Black lives matter, and because Black doctors contribute to more life for Black patients. The life expectancy of these patients increased as the Black doctor pool increased.
Mm-hmm.
So that's the why. It's simple. And medicine is very objective.
Mm-hmm.
What does the number say? The data is there.
Mm-hmm.
As you increase the number of Black doctors, the number of years in terms of life for African-American patients increase.
I think we need to push that statement.
That's there. That's plain and simple.
Yeah.
And so you don't need more why than that in medicine. It improves life. That's why we do it, to improve life.
And so I think in doing that, you kind of, you know how preachers say you getting into my stuff, like you invite somebody up, they start talking and they getting all into your message. So you kind of got into the who. So the next one was going to be who the who is, but we know who the who is, right? And so the what is our objectives and what do we hope to achieve with our Missing at the Table series moving forward?
Yeah, I just want to inspire, one, the end user. So any young Caleb or young Terrell or, young Terrell Jr. who's listening, who's thinking about, maybe God gave you the athletic gene. But also maybe God gave you the intelligence gene. And maybe you got to make a decision. Should you take this NIL deal that's going to give you $90,000 in a month? Or should you pursue medicine? Because it's very hard to do both. Some people have. Myron Rolle is the person who comes to mind. The athlete and brain surgeon. So my inspiration and my motivation is for that dilemma, that person who's dually talented. And I want to convince that person, I know you're dually talented. I know you could be a quarterback and take a team to the Super Bowl, but you also could be a physician and take somebody from a cancer diagnosis to remission. No, which one would you choose?
Yeah. Which one would you choose? I love that. Got some head scratching going on right there. Yeah, some head scratching. Man, look, I appreciate your time. This was a great intro into Missing at the Table, and I think people can get the tenor of where we're going. And as the series progresses, we'll start getting into more nuts and bolts of how to do these things and how to accomplish these things. And I am looking forward. I'm excited for the rest of this, and I hope you guys listening are excited. You got any last words for us, Dr.?
Hey, man, I'm just excited for what's to come. I feel blessed to have met you, and thank you for including me in this discussion. And I think we're doing good work. At least my spirit is telling me that. And so let's keep it going. Let's keep the energy up. And yeah, I'm just excited, man. I'm excited for the outcome.
Okay. Sounds good. Look, man, continue being great. I know you got hospital works to do, but we definitely rooting you on, man, cheering for you, and look forward to segment 2. You guys stay tuned for segment 2, Missing at the Table with Dr. Terrell Coring, MD. Thank you, brother, and God bless you.
Same.
All right. Take care.